Big word. All right. So we may have some others join us online beside yourself. We'll see. I know there's going to be some come in here. But so you've used it before and you want to...
I want to be more comfortable with setting up the gradebook, setting up my discussions and the Dropbox, feed right into the gradebook, and then when I have percentages, of different grades, how to get that set up in the gradebook, and then rubrics as well. I use a rubric, but I use it outside of the gradebook.
Okay, no problem. So you want to be able to kind of look at how to use the rubric inside of the gradebook as well as just setting it up in general.
Yes.
Kind of the gist of it. Okay. I muted you, Wendy. I'm sorry, it was a little loud out there. I shut her up there. She's in the noisy room out there. All right. So let's take a look. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll just kind of get right into CourseDen.
Okay.
So, and if you have questions throughout, it looks like it may just be the two of us, so we're going to keep it pretty casual. Okay. So I'll share my screen with you, but again, we're going to be pretty open for questions. And
okay, I was looking for something that was no, okay.
And you should now see my screen on yours. Do you see that? It's just empty right now, but we'll go ahead and open CourseDen. All right. So I'm going to log in. I'll find a course we can play in here. This is your first semester with us, Sally?
Yes, it is.
Where did you come from?
Columbus State University.
Okay. How long were you with Columbus State?
6 years.
Oh, it's a little while.
A little while, yeah.
All right, I'll try to make sure that's sized okay for you to see it. So this is just a pretend course that I've got a bunch of just random stuff in here we use for testing and kind of to play in. So there's no real data being shared here. So we can keep everybody happy. So again, I'm going to kind of just dive in, but feel free to stop me at any time or redirect if you have a different question. I'm all about that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my grades tab up here. I'm going to go right to the gradebook. So again, if I get in an area you're not sure where I'm at, please stop me. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my gradebook. And this, I have a couple things in here already. So when you first go into your gradebook, most likely you're going to come right to the Manage Grades area. That's probably the default area that you're going to come to. However, if it's a brand new class, it might actually open up in this Setup Wizard. And I'm going to walk through that in just a second to kind of show you what all that does. So I think it's an interesting thing to know. Actually, I'm going to get into a different course because this has too much stuff in it, and the other one I believe is empty. So let me change courses, actually. It's not as pretty on the top here. I've actually been playing with it a little bit. So give me 1 second. Let me fix my nav bar. I was testing something for another professor, so let me fix that real quick. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and go into grades. And never mind, this one has a bunch of stuff in it. I thought I'd already cleaned it out. We do too many testing for so we end up using all of our toy boxes, as you will, for fake courses. So I guess I'll just leave good enough alone and go back where I was. So in the gradebook, let's kind of walk through this top area, this little different menus that we have. So enter grades obviously is where we're going to go just to enter our grades, and we have some different views there, which we'll get into in just a moment. first thing I want to talk about is actually Setup Wizard, and then I'm going to come back to Manage Grades.
Okay.
So the first thing I recommend doing when you set up your gradebook is actually walk through the Setup Wizard, because it actually goes through all the little questions that you may have, and we'll kind of address what those mean. So some of those may not make a lot of sense initially. Come on in. Good, thank you. We have someone joined us here, so I'm David. I have one person online with us as well. Hi. Oh, no worries. Yeah, we're doing a Hangout as well, so that's why you might see a double screen here, but because I'm sharing my screen with Sally. Yep, this is Sally. I'm actually just sharing off we had some technical issues this morning getting started, so. Good. So you're good. Yeah, you're in good shape. So we're just getting started. So right now we're looking at the Setup Wizard inside of the Gradebook. So under the grades, and I just went to the Setup Wizard. So the Setup Wizard actually will walk us through all of these questions that we probably should ask ourselves when we get started anyway, creating our gradebook. So initially it's going to tell us how our gradebook is set up. So if I scroll down here, it actually walks through, it's right now it's set up as weighted. Right now I'm releasing the final adjusted grade. So these are my initial settings, but maybe I want to change that. So I'm going to click on Start down here underneath.
So I would have to do that anyway. So I would go down to Start.
Yeah, you would. That's correct. Yep, and it may open up automatically to the Setup Wizard, or it might open up and Manage Grades, but we'll talk about all these areas. So again, now I'm in Setup Wizard. My first step 1 of 7 here, is I can pick the type of grading I want. So weighted, points, formula. So let's talk about the difference. Weighted grade is kind of my favorite actually, but
That's what I use.
do you? How about you, Sally? What do you use?
Yes, weighted.
You use weighted right now. So weighted lets us do a few things that just make life easier, in my opinion. I just think it makes more sense. But if you do points grade, the points is obviously a good option as well. What I don't recommend is actually formula. So this kind of falls in from the old school systems, in my opinion. Like I used to work with this when it was WebCT, and we did all this stuff way back in the day. And if you wanted to say drop the lowest 2 grades in a gradebook, you had to create this formula to do it. There was no easy way to do it. That's now changed. So now using either weighted or points, you can go in and create categories and actually drop the lowest grade real easy. So thank you, dear. She's closing us in. So I'm going to stick with weighted for right now. But again, if you have questions for points, we can come back and look at that. The thing I want to point out is this little question mark right next to stuff. So you're going to see this throughout. And this little question mark is your friend. So if I click on that, it actually gives me a little bit of an understanding of what weighted does, or whatever it's next to. It's just a little hint, a helpful hint to help you kind of walk through. You're in some setting and you're like, I don't even know what this does. Most of the time they have a little question mark. You can get some idea what that means. Because sometimes it's not as obvious as you think. And sometimes I'd think, and I've been doing this for a long time. I teach stuff and I still wonder, what were they thinking when they made that setting? So that's what that question mark does. So I'm going to leave it as weighted. I'm going to scroll down and say continue. So the next part is what you release at the end of the semester to your students. So for instance, if you like to accept a bribe as a candy bar, just kidding. Don't really do that. But if you want to look at the end of the term and say, well, this person has a 98 and they're right on the cusp, I'm going to go ahead and push them up to, or an 88, sorry, 98. If they're right on the cusp of a grade, and you can actually go and make an adjustment. So if you release the adjusted final grade, that's what you can set to just release that adjusted grade, which means it gives you the option to go and modify the grade before you release it.
Okay, now when you do that, is there an easy way to do that, or like how
Yes.
do you do that?
I'll show you that when we get there. The calculated final grade is just how the system sees it. So whatever math you put in the system is the grade the students get. So they get released that grade as calculated, and you don't need to go in and adjust anything. So
Am I correct that sometimes with a calculated final grade, especially if you use the weighted system, sometimes D2L doesn't calculate them quite like you would by hand or whatever.
That's probably there's probably some truth to that.
Like whether you
I'm gonna
with your percentages or with your decimals or whatever, you know.
Right, right. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to turn the camera on. So tell me your name again. I'm sorry. Kathy. So Kathy can hear you as well. So questions can be, if I can make my... There we go. Can you talk for me one more time?
Yes.
Oh, hang on, I got you turned down. There we go, one more time.
All right. Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay.
I just wanted her to be able to hear your question, so when I'm answering your question, I don't have to repeat. All right. So can you actually repeat your question for me one time, just so we can be on the same page?
I know that, from my past experience and not fully understanding that sometimes if the calculated grade would not really calculate the final grade if you had like decimals within the grade, you know, or whatever, it might not calculate them quite like you would want them to be. And so that was another good reason to use the adjusted. It just seemed like sometimes there were always questions with the calculated grade.
I can see what you're saying. I think that's a possibility, but it's not super likely right now. I know in the past, on and off, they fixed various things inside of the tool, including the gradebook. I believe that was one of them. And one of those is, part of the discrepancy is how many decimals you actually show and different things inside of your settings. So oftentimes if it's set up correctly, you don't have to fight that. But it's also, yeah, it's true. I mean, it's a good idea. I kind of like the adjusted because for whatever reason, it could be right there, and it might be just one of those little things that's just worth going and pushing it up. So yeah, but I think they fixed some of those issues that you're talking about, but that's still a possibility. Yeah, you're correct. So I'm going to leave mine adjusted final grade, and I'm going to go continue. So this next item, so it's talking about whether you're dropping then graded items or treating them as zero. So there's two trains of thought, I guess, on this. So what I like to do is actually, I'm going to tell it to treat, to drop ungraded items initially. So when I first set my gradebook up, I would actually tell it to drop the ungraded items, and then I'd automatically keep my final grade updated. So the only, I guess, caveat in this is as you're going through your semester, you need to make sure you add a 0 to those that are passed. So if someone doesn't do it, you can't just not grade them. They need to be given the 0 so that they have an accurate understanding of their current grade. So that means that way they get an up to now, I'm doing this well. If I tell it to treat ungraded items as 0, then they basically start off failing and they work their way towards a good grade. So some people have that mentality, but I kind of like the other way. Give them a little more of an honest understanding of where. It may not be good. So at the end of the semester, you might want to come back and change the setting, which you can do. Right up on top, there's the settings link, which will get us right where we're at now. I can change all these settings. So I could go to settings, and I can just come back at the end of the semester and get ready to push my grade out. Then I could treat those ungraded, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. I could click treat ungraded items as 0, and then I'd make sure it's accurate. So that's my setting here. I'm going to go ahead and click continue.
Now, the students can see that, though. Are the students going to think they have a much higher grade than they do if they haven't turned in assignments? Because it's going to reflect a higher grade? If
you don't give them a 0, that's correct. So if they let it pass but you don't grade them, you just leave it empty, then that's exactly correct. Then they are going to think they have a higher grade. Can you hear her questions as well, Sally?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and say continue. So I don't usually mess with this a lot. Normally by default you just see percentage. I've actually built a grade scheme for letter grades, which you can do. That's really the only reason I see doing a lot with schemes is if you want to build a letter grade scheme. So then you can go and modify the letter grades, and if you're pushing letter grade in CourseDen. Some people don't do that. They just give them percentage and push letter grade up into BandWeb. So as of right now, CourseDen only talks kind of one direction to our banner system. It just pushes stuff to us. We don't push stuff back. So when you do your grades at the end of the semester, you have to go into the banner system and put your final grades in. So you can also, of course, you can give them a grade in here, but you have to manually go take them into banner.
So, right. So
Yeah.
you got to go in and then just assign all the grades.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where your letter grades would come in, really. So I'm going to say continue. And then this is just display options. So right now, by default, it's 2 decimals, which is pretty standard, but you can modify that if you want. Again, there's a question mark. So if you want to check on things, you can do that. And some of these aren't really a big deal. You don't have to go look at them too hard. So here's my student view display options. So this is how the student will see his gradebook. So again, they have points grade, and again, if I click on these, it's going to kind of walk me through it. The points grade will be associated. So if the students see these particular items, so whether it's the points, so 18 out of 20, or if it's a weighted grade, 89% or whatever, the grade scheme symbol is actually the percentage. So the weighted grade is actually the out of. It's really a little bit confusing because the grade scheme symbol and the weighted grade. Let me see if this gives a more clear understanding. We'll open up that gradebook in just a second, kind of show you, because it's not as obvious as it looks. The color gives you kind of an just immediate red's bad, green. This one's failing, so that's what that does. You can modify that too.
So that grade scheme symbol is color. Oh no.
Yeah, the grade scheme symbol is the color is all by itself. Sorry. Yeah. Yep. Characters displayed. So if you use a text item in your gradebook, you can modify that. And then if you want to, you can actually display how the final grade calculation, how it calculates for the end user. They can click on the thing. It's not real obvious, but they can go in and see exactly how you're calculating their grade. Calculator. Yeah, it should be there anyway, right? So I'm going to say continue. And now my last step is just to make sure I agree with what I've just told it to do, kind of just reviewing the settings I've just kind of specified, and just say finish. So when that finishes setup wizard, it pops me into this little area. Now, of course, I can go to all of these, or I can just click across the top and go to most of these as well. There's a few things here that I haven't. We don't really push, like import grades. You can do that, but that can be kind of problematic. So what we've seen more and more is most book publishers these days have their own basically learning management system, and a lot of the stuff you do might be taught inside of their system, kind of through here, but it's really there. So it's tricky. If you can do that, I would highly recommend come talk to us, because depending on the book publisher, depending on the system they're using. I am David Lloyd.
I spoke to you just the other day.
Probably.
About Writer's Help 2.0.
Oh, yes, you did, Kathy. That's right. I just sent you an email this morning. Yeah. So there are some things you can do with that, but it can be difficult. Yeah. Yeah, and as Kathy noticed, we talked earlier about her book publisher basically said, this is all integrated, it works fine. But it's not necessarily true. Just the ability to be integrated is one thing, and actually working with the Georgia Board of Regents to make it work here is a whole different story. So it's not quite as easy as it sounds. So let's pop over to Manage Grades for a moment. So under my Manage Grades tab, so again, I already have some things in here, and if you'll notice, the gray rows here are actually categories. So I have an assignments category, a discussions category, a quizzes category. So I really like being able to use categories. I have some just random stuff in here as well, but notice this yellow star. This is actually a column I've created just for bonus. So I can create a gradebook item that's just to add bonus points. Maybe you're giving attendance, but it's just going to be a bonus. Or you have, I don't know if you both are teaching fully online, or these face-to-face or hybrid. Face-to-face. Yours is fully online, Sally?
Yeah.
Okay. So again, it really doesn't matter as far as how you teach. There's maybe various ways that you want to hand out bonus points or things manually, if you will.
But that's not a category, right?
That's not a category. That's actually an item. So up here on top, you'll notice these items. So these discussions these are what they call gradebook items, and they're underneath a category. So they're inside of this category. Discussions has all of these, and altogether, my discussions are worth 35% of my entire grade. You also notice on top here, I have a messed up gradebook. It says final calculated grade sums, it's too high. So because I was playing with this earlier, showing somebody, I've added a grade item that doesn't really calculate into my gradebook scheme. So I would need to fix that to make it right. So right now I have 35% here for all discussions total. Most of these are the same, but notice this one here, this is actually a bonus. It has some bonus points, so it's a little different. All of these are actually worth the same weight, but they're worth 35% total of my entire grade. But each inside, think of each category as kind of it's self-contained. So every category has to equal 100% of that category. So the weight for this category, I have 5 different ones here, so each are worth 20 points, or 20 weight for that category. So they're worth 100% of 35%. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That confuses people sometimes.
Yes.
So this is basically 20% of 35%.
Okay.
That can be confusing. I know it does a lot of times. I get people going, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. And they'll try to add too much weight to individual items, although they're part of a category. So,
Okay, so you've got the categories and then
the items.
Okay, so categories.
Yep.
And items must add up to 100%.
If they're in a category, then they need to add up to 100% of the category. Or you can have an item outside of the category. For instance, maybe your final exam, it doesn't really need a category, but it could be maybe it's worth 15% of your final grade. So you take that 15% and add it to the category weights, so that in general, all of your main weights add up to 100%. Does that make sense?
Kind of sort of.
Kind of sort of. I'll show you with that. So I'm going to scroll down. I'm actually going to get rid of a couple of things down here because I don't really need them. So I don't have any weight a couple of these. They're just in here for fun. So I have one, obviously it was junk because it doesn't even make sense. And a quiz formula was in here kind of for fun. Some other feedback before. So notice across here too, there's another thing I want to point out. So association right here is also very important. So there's a type, which you're only going to see on the gradebook items, because categories don't really have a type. They're just a category, the container for certain gradebook types. Most of the time you're going to use numeric type, because that's really all you can use to add up. So you may have other things in here. We'll look at the different options in a minute, but most of these are going to be numeric. I notice for my discussions, all of my discussions have associations to a discussion, which means they actually tie to one of the tools in Desire to Learn. So I've already built a discussion.
Is that a discussion forum?
Yes, well, a discussion topic inside of a forum, but yeah. I know that. So discussions have the same kind of thing. They have their own category and then discussions. Yes, Sally.
Okay, this brings about one question from me.
Okay.
When you have your course envisioned, and you are going to have so many discussions, so many Dropbox assignments, do you go in first and set up the gradebook, or does the gradebook get developed as you set up the Dropbox?
That can be actually done either way, and I'll show you. So if it was me, I would actually create my my discussions and build my gradebook as I built my discussion. You can do it
Okay.
in the process.
Okay.
It's not kind of automatically, but you can do it in the process.
Okay.
I'll show you that in one of the tools in just a moment, so you can see what I mean by that. So whether it's quizzes,
Right.
discussions, assignments, all of those you can associate as you build the item, that particular using that tool. So the other piece that I want to point out is, so again, I'm going to delete a couple, but the reason I'm talking about associations is because if I have something associated, I cannot delete that out of the gradebook until I either unassociate it or remove the particular tool it's tied to, that particular Dropbox. For instance, doc assignment, this little I right here, if I click on that, it's going to kind of tell me this is associated to doc assignment example. So it tells me exactly what that's associated to in my Dropbox. So if I said I don't want this anymore, I would first need to go to this assignment and either unassociate it, so take it out of that area, I'll show you that in a second, or just go delete that assignment, and then I would have this area to show there'd be nothing in this box. So like for instance, W4 quiz is not associated to an actual quiz I have in here. Perhaps this was a hybrid class, and this was a quiz I'm handing out in class on a paper. So I could do that, and I don't have to associate it to anything. I don't have to associate it to an online quiz. I'm handing it out, and I'm manually adding the grade later. So I'm coming into my gradebook and manually adding it. So there's reasons not to necessarily be associated. For you, Sally, not so much probably. Most of yours will probably be associated because it's a fully online class.
Exactly.
But for Kathy, she may have some that she's manually editing. So.
Okay.
So I'll come down here a little bit and make sure we got everything else. Okay. So again, mine's wrong already. I noticed I'm 15% too high. So I'm going to try to clean this up a little bit. So first, right up here, there's new, which we'll get to this in a second. This is how I can create an item or a category. So this is one way to do it. Again, I can also create these items from the tool, the Dropbox, the quiz, or discussion. But the category, if I want to organize my gradebook, I do need to create those here. Under More Actions, if I click this little drop down, you can give it in if you want. Hi Jennifer, how are you? Have you joined us? Looks like you're muted right now, so I just want to make sure you can hear me.
She's muted too.
Oh, I think she might have muted herself because she was working.
Yeah. I muted myself and now I've lost you. Let me go back to you.
You're just fine. Okay, as long as you can hear us, no problem, Jennifer.
Okay.
If you click on the top, Jennifer, there's a settings like a gear icon inside the Hangout. You may not have a microphone, and that's just fine. Feel free to just send us a chat text if you'd like, if you have any questions. We're just kind of in the middle of just looking at some options under Gradebook.
I'm not, let's see. There we go. I'm back now. Okay.
You're back with us?
Yeah.
Okay. So up here next to new, there's More Actions. So if I click More Actions, this is where I can either delete things if it's not associated. I can reorder them just to put them in the order that I want. Or I can actually look at an event log. The event log can come in handy as well. So if you delete, for instance, I'll get to that in a sec. First I'm going to say delete. So I'm just going to click delete here. It actually opens a new screen. And then I can look at the different ones.
Oh, so you get a whole other screen.
A whole other screen.
Check it.
It would make sense. Oftentimes I end up checking them and click delete and check them again. But no, you actually have to click delete and then see what you want. So notice under delete here I have a bunch of stuff that I can't do anything. I cannot check because these are my associated items. I'm not allowed to delete them because they're associated to something else. So it's saying you don't want to delete that. It's tied to something. But down here underneath, I have some that are not associated. So I can come down here, I can select a few of these. I'm just going to delete a few of them. I'll get rid of these ones I don't really need. I'll keep the final exam.
Numeric, I thought that showed that it was associated.
Numeric is showing the type of column, but not that it's associated. So it's or the type of item. So it's using numeric. Some of these are formula or calculated, so there's other options. For instance, this is a pass-fail. That simply shows what type of gradebook item it is. And I'll show you that in 1 second. So I'm going to go ahead and delete a few of these. Clean it up a little bit. So I'm still 5% over because I have one extra thing down here, but it's associated to my Dropbox. I can't just delete it. But maybe I can come in here and modify it if I wanted to, make a bonus or something. So it wasn't part of that. So if I lose you, let me know, Sally or Jennifer. So now let's take a look at the different type of items, and then I'm going to walk into the assignments and stuff as well, or how to modify these. So before we get into the discussion, the categories and what you can do with them, I'm going to look at some different items. So I'm going to click New. I'm going to click Item. So this is where, again, if I wanted to build one manually inside my gradebook, I come in here and pick these different options. Sally mentioned earlier, you can also do this, say, from the Dropbox. But if I do, I don't have the option to pick formula or calculated. If I make an item in the gradebook from the Dropbox or from the quiz, it's going to make a numeric item. And this is your most common one. This is really, if you're trying to calculate a grade, this is usually where you're going to be at. But you could do some other ones just so you have it. You might even want a text column so you can come in there and put some notes or whatever about the student or about the student's nickname or something if you wanted to.
See the text.
They could unless you hide that. So if you create a column in here, they're going to see it. I wouldn't make notes that you don't want them to see, but you might want a nickname for them or something. I've heard of people wanting to do that kind of stuff, or just even a 917 number, then hide it, or not that, but something along those lines. There's an option. It's not used very heavily, but I've heard of people that's kind of requested that type of option. So now if I click numeric, because again, this is really the one we're going to use 90% of the time, if not more. Now I can come in and give it a name. I can give it a short name if I want to. I wouldn't need to. I'm just going to make a bonus item. Just, bonus bring chocolate item is what it ought to be. I'm going to call this my chocolate item.
It made me hungry.
I know. I can bring in chocolate. Don't worry. That'll make them jealous. They're too far away to eat chocolate. And the short name is just for you. If I want to put in a short name, maybe I have a pretty long name and then a regular name. I can make it just abbreviated or something. So right now, the categories right here, I can either associate that to one of my categories, or I can leave it outside of the category. It doesn't matter. So again, depending, it might matter if I've already said I already have 4 categories. My categories are right. So maybe I'm going to create an item. I have 7 tests in my exam. I decide I'm going to give 1 more quiz, but I don't want to change the whole nature of the value of my quizzes. They're still going to be worth 35% of their entire grade. If I add a quiz to the category, it can automatically change the weight for everything so that the weight of my quiz category stays the same. The weight of individual quizzes inside the category changes slightly. I hope that didn't confuse.
Well, I'm thinking that what I do is I dump everything that's not my major papers into the daily grade.
Okay.
So quizzes are in daily grades, the other ones, but I'm thinking it might be helpful to be able to see the quizzes even though they're dumped into the daily grade.
I would actually categorize. We can look at your direct one after if you want and see how to change it. Because there's always, just on paper, just your ideas, and we can probably make a good idea. So I'm going to leave this out of the category because I'm going to make it a bonus anyway, and I don't really need it to be part of a category. So I can come down here and put a description if I want. This you can allow the students to see or not. There's an option down here for that. By default, they don't, but be careful because that's a possibility. So here's my point value up here. So I can give it points and a weight. So notice they don't have to be the same. So perhaps I have a quiz that's worth 100 points, but it's going to only be worth a certain weight of their overall grade. So that also can confuse people sometimes. I'm going to just leave it at 10 and 10. Well, I'll go with 5 on the weight because, again, this is just going to be bonus. And I'm going to come right down here and I'm going to select bonus. So, again, our little question marks can be handy. So they're not included in maximum points. Bonus are basically points for them. It can't be taken against. So if the student does not do this, it can't count against them. It's only good for them.
Oh, okay.
So it doesn't go toward the total final possible, only the total final they achieved. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So that's the idea behind that. And you can also make it so this particular item could make them exceed the total. So if you use this, they can exceed the maximum points possible, which kind of bonus is doing anyway, but there's some other reasons you might want to do this. It's not used very heavily. I'm going to leave my grade scheme this default as percentage. I could even, if I wanted to, and again, we talked a little about this initially, we could add a rubric right to the gradebook item. So oftentimes my rubrics are better off associated to the tool, but it's possible, especially say in discussions. Discussions are a little tricky with rubrics. Just right up front, they don't work as well as they should. But you could associate the rubric to the gradebook item for discussions and use it that way. It can be complicated. The rubrics have their own set of issues. They don't tie over as well into discussions. Yeah. I mean, they can be very useful, but when you're using discussions and rubrics, be careful. With other tools, it's not so bad.
I'm just not sure about putting it into the gradebook and making sure I get that.
Yeah.
Right.
It's usually not bad. It's just really the discussions that causes problems because the students have a hard time seeing them when you're done. So we can look at that. So there's my options. I'm going to open this show display options, as you can see it. So I have the ability to show some other things to my students. I could also override my defaults. So the default right now is already set in my settings, which we kind of walked through earlier. But I could override that for this particular item. So they may only show them, I don't know, I don't know why I'd do that for this item, but you could. So I'm going to go ahead and say save and close. So now I still only have 5% above because I already did, but my chocolate is yellow down here, and it's only helping the students. It can't take away. It didn't add to the total points possible. So that's where that comes in. So now I think I need to go fix my values here. So instead of making a category, I'm going to go ahead and edit one of my categories to show you kind of how they work. So again, I could make one by clicking New and click Category, and then category for however you want to chunk up your material in your class, like whether it's quizzes, drop boxes, have them all separate. I don't know how your gradebook scheme looks right now, but you can pretty much accommodate most of them pretty well in here. Doesn't? Yes. So the little arrow next to these have a menu. So if I click on the arrow, I could either edit it, I could actually go in and enter grades, and that takes me over to the other side. I can view stats or go to the event log, different things. I'm just going to edit it. I could click directly on it as well, but we'll just click Edit Grade Item. So I can change the name. If I'm creating one, I'm going to have pretty much the same screen, but obviously I'll have to create this information, so let's type in discussions. And again, I have the option for description. I'm not using that, but I could have it. You'll also see areas inside of D2L that show notes. If it says notes, that's actually just for you. If you see description, the students can most likely see it, or at least have the option. But if it just says notes there, that means that's just as you're building something. And you'll see it every once in a while in different areas throughout. So I'm going to come down. So under distribution, here's my weight, first of all. So this particular item, now I have 35. I'm going to change it to 30 so I can fix my gradebook scheme, so I'm back to 100%. So I'm going to modify my weight. So my total for discussions is going to be worth 30% of my entire grade. I'm actually down here, I'm distributing the weight evenly across all items. So the way I have this set up, all of my discussions are worth the same each. So you may want that different. For instance, in a quiz, you might have one quiz that weights higher. It's worth 200 points, and all the other exams are worth 100. And you actually want it to weigh higher. If you did, you could even come right here and say distribute weights by points across all items in category. Then it takes their points into consideration and gives them weights based on that. So if one has higher point, it also has a higher weight value for that category. Did I lose you with that?
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah, don't worry about that.
But it just basically means if you, I think there's an easier way to say that. But if I have 4 quizzes, 3 of them are worth 100 points, 1 of them is worth 200 points. If I was to stick the bottom one down here, they would all be worth the same weight, and it wouldn't matter how many points they're worth.
Right.
If I select the middle one, the one that's worth 200 points, would actually also weigh more. So it actually means they actually, for that category, that one means more than the rest to the students. So a little bit confusing. I don't see it used a lot, but every now and then it does come in handy. And I can also manually assign the weights to each item if I want to. I can go and do the math myself. I want this to be worth this. If I'm going to do that, I wouldn't even use the category. Right. I mean, and you don't really have to have a category. The point of the category, in my opinion, is kind of to make this easier. So if you're going to do that, there's not really a good reason to use a category that I could see. But the bottom two. So the other big benefit of this bottom one, notice if I select something else up here, this bottom thing grays out. If I distribute evenly, I can actually very easily drop the lowest or the highest, which I don't know why I do. I can drop the lowest grade, or lowest 2 grades, or lowest 6 grades. I'll have another meeting, no problem. It was nice talking to you. Let us know what we can do for you. Feel free to give us a call anytime. You bet. Hope that makes sense. So it's pretty easy to do. Again, that used to be really hard to do in the older systems. It was a pain. You had to go create a formula and do the whole 9 yards. Now I can just say I want to drop the lowest 2 out of here.
Right.
And then I say that's all I got to do. And I'm going to go ahead and just save and close. Well, I'm not going to drop 2. I'll just drop 1. And I'll say save and close. And now notice that red notes area is fixed. I'm no longer getting screamed at. Tell me my math is bad.
Not saying you're good. So that's kind of the way the categories work. Now it shows my gradebook is pretty right, although some of these I still have some stuff on the bottom that I probably change just because they're me playing around before, but that gives me an idea on kind of how that part works, hopefully. Any thoughts on that?
And for what I want to do, it looks
Mhm.
like it's doable.
I think it's pretty powerful. It's actually one of the things when we went from Blackboard to Desire to Learn. I think this gradebook is actually a little better, at least from the Blackboard's old stuff that we did use.
I never
So-
worked on the Blackboard, and I've been very adverse with the D2L, but again, that was like a couple of years ago,
Yeah,
and with the gradebook, so I've never used it. And I know people who teach at UWG who will not use
the gradebook.
and so
It's good, bad, and indifferent. I think
well,
sometimes
no,
as
I'm
it's
trying
positives.
to be totally transparent, and so
Gotcha.
I think for students to be able to see their grades, but I've had discussions with other teachers here, and they're like, they get grade obsessed.
Yeah.
They get to look at it all the time, then they totally obsess about it. And
Yeah.
if they have to keep, then it's their deal if they have to keep track of their own grades and all this other stuff.
Yeah,
So I don't know, but I kind
there's-
of like the idea. I mean, maybe I just won't let them see it, but I like the idea of having the grades up there, and actually, I really kind of like the idea for them to be able to see it.
I do too, actually. I do too. I think it's important. I take classes as well. I'm still trying to get smarter. Eventually, I'm going to get smart, but it's going to take me a while. But I appreciate. I think that's just important, so I know where you're at as you go through.
Well, you
So,
always tell you this, I can show you my grade book whenever you want.
yeah,
See your grades whenever you want. And at the end of the year, also, I print out a thing that shows exactly where they're at.
Yeah.
What they're, and then your final paper, you
ta-da! Yeah,
ta-da, you need to get this to be able to get.
yeah. To get this grade right. So there's my manage grades area. The enter grades. I'm going to bounce over before I get into some of the tools. I'm going to click on enter grades. So I've been playing. Some of these are just our student assistants, so there's not actually did anything wrong. No bad grades are had here. These are all pretend bad grades.
Oh, good.
So and some of these are good ones too. She's our good student. She's our nursing student. She's awesome. So I have a couple ways of looking at this. So this is where I'm entering grades if I want to grade from inside the gradebook. But I don't have to. I could actually grade from the Dropbox tool, or the quiz automatically will grade. So if someone takes a quiz, it'll automatically put it in here. I don't have to come in here and grade it, unless it's something that's requiring grading. If it's a paragraph question or something. So when I'm going to grade, I have a couple options. So for instance, let's bounce over here a little bit, take a look. And some of these you'll notice, see this right here? If I mouse over to tell them what's going on. So this is actually dropped because I dropped the lowest grade for my discussions in this category. So this shows which ones are dropped. So that's what that's telling me. This was dropped because it was the lowest grade. This one. Because this is inside this category.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
Does that make sense? So that one's dropped. And Jessica's actually an instructor here, I think. And these are more of my discussions across the side. Now up here it's showing me the category that it's in. So this is in the discussions category. These are some different discussions, assignments, and it's splitting the name every now and then. Here's my assignments category. You can see that some of these have submissions. I could actually click on that and go ahead and grade it if I wanted to. Or I can come up here to the very top and click the drop down, click grade all. Now I can see the submission. I could click on that, open the submission. It'll open up in a new window. So I can grade it. If I want to grade it from here, again, I can grade it from the tool as well. If I click that, I think it's just a PDF file. And here I'm using Turnitin, which is the plagiarism detection as well as other things. It does some neat stuff for you. So if you haven't used that, it's worth it.
I went to a Turnitin seminar,
Okay.
but I haven't done it yet.
And I think that Turnitin may have gave you a little bit of faulty information, frankly, because it's integrated into our system. So you can use it externally, but you don't have to. It's super easy to use inside of CourseDen. So just creating your assignment, you just select one little checkbox and you can use it right inside. So inside of CourseDen, this is showing me, again, these are all fake anyway. So this is saying there's 50% matching. Doesn't mean it's plagiarized, means that's what's matching. Maybe it's all cited correctly and everything's perfect in a good world. But I click on this and it'll actually open up a new window up here. And it'll open up inside of Turnitin. It'll let me see everything that's matching. This is showing read only because this is an old assignment. So that's why it's telling me this is actually outdated. You can't use this because my dates are off because this is an old class. So that's why it's giving me the read only. But it shows me over here, I have all the purple is coming from this area. That number 2. Number 5 is from this area. So it gives me a very it's a great resource to see what's matching and where it's coming from. So each of these are color coded and numbered and tell me exactly where that particular piece of information was gathered from on the web or on someone else's paper or wherever. It'll actually tell me exactly where it found a match. And again, it might not mean anything. It might be something, or once in a while, small matches sometimes. It's just very commonly used phrases or words and you can kind of ignore. And I can do that actually. I can come in here and ignore certain, if I open that up to one. So this is just going to show me this one. And I can see the full source, right? Or I can actually just ignore that particular.
And just by clicking the X, that ignores it.
If I scroll down, let's see if I can. I might not show it here because we're in a read only. Normally I give a little option to click and I can say ignore this source and it'll just go away. I think it's not showing me that because we're in the read only view. So that's the originality part. So there's also something called Grademark. I click on that. Grademark can do some automatic basic grammar check for me that I can either agree with or not and change it or fix them and add my own. So a lot of professors come in and build their own kind of comments that I can say, well, this one really needs to be over here. Again, it's not going to let me do this because it's read only. But normally I can just drag this over and put it wherever I want and mark it up the paper for the student. Or I can say, well, this one's not what I agree with. If it wasn't read only, I'd give an option to remove it. Just click it and make it go away. Like now, I don't agree with that. So I can get rid of them or add my own. But by default, it does a pretty decent job on certain things, especially like spelling and things that are pretty obvious to tell. So that's what the Grademark is. PeerMark shows in here. However, PeerMark does not work with the integration part of it. I haven't only heard about 4 people that want to use it, but PeerMark kind of lets each student do some peer review type stuff inside of Turnitin. But
We do inside of Turnitin. But
yeah,
we do because that's what I was I used to, and I can't remember. I think it was D2L, where I would put up a discussion forum.
Yep.
I would limit it to 3 students per discussion, and so each one would put up their paper
and then
and
peer
they
that.
could do peer review.
Yeah, you can still do that inside the discussion tool. Yeah.
Okay. So, and that would be a better way to go then.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that's not a bad option. Again, this is really more just for the Dropbox tool, not the discussion tool. So this item is really just tied to the Dropbox for assignments, papers, that kind of thing. So that's kind of handy. That's what Turnitin is all about. Again, I won't get real deep into it, but you can do a lot of stuff with Turnitin. And the students can actually see all this. So you can actually show them if it's plagiarized, they can pop up and see where it matches. They can see, again, there's some things you have to, when you create it, you have to make those settings on, but so they can view all of those things as well. So it should be a good learning tool for students. I know our director, he's very good about, this is not a gotcha tool, this is a learning tool. And that's what it should be. But anyway, so I'm going to close this link here.
I think most people look at this as a gotcha.
I know they do. And it makes me a little sad because it's ideally we're here to teach students, but oftentimes get caught up sometimes.
Particularly for like their first paper, which is a memoir. So it says only 10% of their final grade. And if they really blow, which I don't think they will, they can redo it. But
Yeah.
I want to have them, upload it and turn in a copy and hard copy.
Yeah.
But because I'm not really comfortable with the major papers and
Right.
so maybe I will come in and talk to you people.
Yeah, of course. Do come by anytime. We can walk through it. Now if I'm inside of here, now it's actually pushed me over into my Dropbox tool, kind of. It's similar to the Dropbox tool. If I wanted to, I can come here and grade it. So I don't have a rubric associated to that. If I did, I could click on the rubric and actually just select the rubric, click, and here's the grade. I could select each area of the rubric that they were proficient in, and I can show you that in a second. But I could grade from right here if I had rubrics associated, or because I don't, is out of 100, I can just come in here and put a grade. So I opened up the assignment, look at it, come over here, grade it, add a grade and publish it. So because Miata's, of course, does, we're going to give her a grade, and I can just click publish. It'll automatically put that grade in there from the gradebook. So that's one way to grade. So I'm just at that student. I could click next student now. It'll go to my next. See, I'm in the folder submissions. I'm in the Dropbox. It's the terminology sometimes is confusing. Christian was he was one of our student workers. Now he's moved on to the real world, graduated. Now he's all big man on campus, working for the real world. So I can come in again and just grade, move on. He didn't throw anything in here, so I have nothing here. In the past, if they hadn't submitted something, I couldn't grade this way. It was kind of tricky. They fixed that in the system now because you might want to grade a 0. They didn't turn it in. So he did not submit anything, but I could still come in and say, well, you got to turn something in, pal. And I can just give him a grade, save it, go to the next student. And then he is actually the last student in there. That's why there's no more next student. He's the last one, and they only had 3 or 4 students. So that's how that's done. So I'm going to say back to folder submissions. So now I'm really in my Dropbox now, looking at the submissions just for the one particular item. So I'm going to click Dropbox. So now we've kind of looked at the gradebook. I want to show you how you can associate things from the gradebook. If I create an assignment, how do I create my gradebook item and tie it directly to that? All right. Again, feel free to ask anything if you have any questions, Jennifer. So I'm going to say new folder, which is really a new assignment. I wish they would make their terminology a little more on cue, but that's okay. So I'm going to say new folder. And I'm going to say, we'll go with because I just moved to Georgia. Well, it's been a long time ago now, but I pretend like I'm not from here sometimes. The get her done assignment. I'm from Idaho, and our terminology is not quite the same, but it's pretty much the same. Redneck. Still not quite get her done, but pretty close. So we'll have a get her done assignment. Here's my originality check option. I can just come in here and select that. Now, as soon as I select that, what I don't know is underneath a bunch of options just opened up. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so the originality check, this is a new assignment. I always have them do 3 drafts of every assignment.
Okay.
Now, are they going to originality check themselves out of it?
It's possible. So there's a couple options for that. And I'll show you. We'll get down to the settings and we'll look at some of those settings. So you can actually have it not turn. I'll show you some of the settings for that. Okay. There's some options to kind of get away from that. Or you might want to have, we can talk about different options, but there are some options and that is something to watch. However, later when you go back and look at it, you can just ignore their own paper. So you have an option. You might see their paper as a source, but then you can just ignore that source. So it's not counting against them. Good. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I'm going to check that. My folder type. This is an individual folder. I've built groups in here, so it's giving me an option. This is obviously my not wanting to type anything real, so I made up a group name. So I could give it to a certain group, but I'm giving this to individuals. I'm not putting it in a category. Now, this is not the grade item category. This is a category for the assignment. So each of the tools. So each of the tools kind of have their own ability to separate and make categories. So discussions, I could have a set of discussions, week 1 discussions, or I don't know if I would do week 1 discussions. Maybe I have one every day. So I had 4 discussions or 5 discussions. Right. And I put them all in one little organized category just as far as the discussion. It's not associated to the grade book. That's just to organize it for the students. It's not really important depending how you lay out your class. I don't see it as being necessary normally if you lay out your class using the other option. But you can kind of ignore that in my opinion. There may be reasons down the road you're like, I think I want to do that. Let me talk about it. Now, the grade item right now, if I had one that's empty, if I click this, these are the ones that I have in my grade book that are not associated to something else, which means I can't associate this to something already associated. So if I have, like you noticed in my gradebook earlier, we had some discussions, but they're already associated to a discussion. I mean, some gradebook items, they're already tied to a discussion. or to a Dropbox. So I can't reuse them unless I change them all out, right? Does that make sense? I've lost you a little bit, I think.
Kind of, sort of.
But basically, if I went ahead previously and pre-built my gradebook items in my gradebook, then I come back and say, well, here's the one I've already made for my Get Her Done assignment. I have a Get Her Done item I already built because I was prepping, right? I was getting ready. But I don't have to do that. I can just come right down here and say, I don't have a gradebook item already made for this, so I'm going to make one. So I'm going to say new gradebook item. And just for simplicity's sake, I'll also call this Get Her Done. This is where I may have a short name. Maybe I just want to GRGE or GRD, we'll call it. Get Her Done. And I can also put it in a category. So I'm making an assignment. So I'm just going to go ahead and make it part of that category. So it's going to be part of my assignments category. Scroll down again. I could use description. I don't have to, and it automatically gives a weight because it's part of the category. It gets weight because my category has a weight. So my category is kind of mandating. It just divvies it up exactly, and I'll make it worth say 100 points. And then I'm going to come down here. So there's a few other options. Again, I could make this particular item bonus from here. I can do all of that as well, kind of like I did earlier in the gradebook. I could make this item a bonus item. I can add the rubric right here. So adding the rubric here. So this is where it does get confusing, people, because notice what I have open now, this little white box is really my gradebook. And I'm creating an item in the gradebook. And if I click this, this associates my rubric to the gradebook item. Notice over here in this gray area behind us, I also have the option to associate a rubric directly to the assignment. So especially in discussions, this gets really confusing, and you have to be careful which one you're associating. Make sure you only use one way to do it and just do it that way.
Right.
Otherwise, it can really get kind of confusing.
Okay.
This is one of those I would call a fault with the tool, but that's how it is. So just watch how you're associating. And if I don't have a rubric already, I can create a rubric. So I can actually go create one and build it and add it right to it. Because this is a Dropbox, I'm not going to do that here. And here's my visibility. I can talk. I'm going to leave these kind of alone, but right now this grade item is always visible, which makes sense to me. I don't need to hide it from the student, but I could if I wanted to. And I'm going to say save.
Well, I like to give my students their grades at the same time.
Yeah,
So
and that's totally
they won't have to be
understandable.
harassed,
Yeah. Or you might be going in and you're grading them and you want to go back and make sure they're right before you push them out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Especially on a paper or something, You start out thinking this is a great paper. Time you're done, you're like, wait a minute. I might have rechanged my whole theory here.
It happens.
Yeah, it definitely does. So there's my initial. Now I'm associated. So this out of, you'd think that'd just pull right over because I just told the gradebook item it's out of 100, but I have to also add that here. So this is my point value. So whatever I just added to the gradebook, this is going to match that. So I'm just going to say out of 100. And I could have even come down here and said it's out of 100, but I didn't associate it to a gradebook item, which means it's a little confusing. It should automatically make it, but it doesn't. So it's saying it's worth 100 points, but I'm not really counting it toward them in the grades, which I've seen people do, and sometimes there's a good reason. Normally, I would say those things should kind of match up. It's either graded or it's not, but oftentimes they don't. And this is how the student would preview that. It's worth 100 out of 100, 100%. So this is kind of how they see that. So if I want to add a rubric here, again, this is a Dropbox tool. Maybe I want to add a rubric to it. I don't think I have any made, but I click Add Rubric. I do have a couple made already. So I could come in here and utilize one that I've already built. Or I can click Create Rubric in a new window. It's going to open up a brand new tab up here. And now I could come in here and make a rubric. I won't get too deep in this because this can get a little heavy, actually. Take a little bit. So by default, notice the status is draft. And I'm going to leave it in draft until it's done. But once it's done, I'll have to publish it before I can use it. But I'm going to leave it in draft. I could, again, have a description. And there's different types of rubrics. So analytic or holistic. I kind of like analytic better. This will give us some information as far as the difference. That's very handy. Can you see that over there? Yeah, I don't know if you can see our pop-up window. Sorry, I'll just see if she can see it. I don't know if you can see that or not, Jennifer, but if you click on what are rubric types, it actually pops up a little description and tells you exactly kind of what the difference is between an analytic rubric and a holistic rubric. The nature of I'm sure my screen doesn't share that with you, so I'm just letting you know what we're looking at. So normally I'm kind of an analytic rubric kind of person. But holistic, in the past, a lot of the other tools only really let you do kind of one kind, because a rubric, my idea behind a rubric was if I grade it or if you grade it and we use the same rubric, the student gets the same grade.
Right.
And it should be the holistic is more like, I feel like they should get a couple more points. So it's oftentimes looking at it like, well, I'm going to give them a range of points in each area. And then depending how I feel that day, I don't really like that nature. But there are reasons to do it, especially in some of the arts. Depending what you're teaching, there may be reasons to do that. Sometimes it's not easy just to cut. It doesn't as cut and dry as it should be in some things that you're grading. So I can see them being possibilities. But I'm more of an analytic kind of rubric person, I think, as far as pushing that out.
My other thing is I could show you the rubric that I just did for their first paper.
Uh,
And I don't know that it's a good rubric, but at least, I like letting the students know what I'm looking for. I tell them flat out, we go over in class, and then when they hand back the paper, there it is listed.
Exactly.
Percentage of the final grade. Why they got what they got.
No, exactly. So now I can make levels and different criteria. So I can say there's 4 levels deep. This is the different criteria I'm grading against, and I can modify that. I can do custom points. This is again where one of those I can actually make it custom. This is worth between 2 and 4 points. This is worth. Some of this can get rather confusing. I'd rather stick with points. Again, this also gives me that water scoring method. It'll give me that pop-up to tell me what that means. So it'll walk through that. Yes. Yes, you sure do. And I'll show one I've already built. They might not be great because they're me playing, but I'll show one I built.
We've got the QEP now, and then we've got I tried to do the QEP. I pulled up one QEP for English, but it was really more for a research paper.
Gotcha.
And this was a personal memoir.
So gotcha.
They had one section, and I just had a heck of a time. And I figured, because I just thought I would get my students used to the idea.
Yeah.
QEP and all this way. Yeah. I just chucked
Read it.
After wasting, time. I graded almost a whole class. I thought,
it's not going to work. And sometimes they don't.
Confusing.
Yeah, I can understand that. I could even hide scores from student views. I don't know why I do that, but you could. So once I have that, I can either save it. If I click levels and criteria, notice it's going to tell me I'm saved successfully. So just changing that will actually save my rubric. So it automatically saves my basic rubric. Now it's empty, of course, but it does show that I have my different criteria. I have 4 levels. So I can come in here and click these drop downs and I can edit any of this. So maybe this first criteria is, we'll just go simple stuff like this, say spelling. And so you could easily modify, say this is spelling, and then the different points. This one doesn't show us a 0 point column. I recommend adding one. I like the idea of a 0 point column.
We can add that.
Yes, you can certainly, and you can. Yep. Or when you build one, just one of these, you can also modify that. So just how many levels you want, and then just change the values. So the value is only worth 1 or 0 points. So a 0 point column might be they either totally missed the point on one of them, so they just get 0 in that area, or there's other reasons. Sometimes you just want to go back and fix a rubric that you kind of messed up on.
Level 4 is a 100.
Right.
Level 3 is a 75. Level 2 is a 50.
Right. Right. Again, it depends. Maybe it's only worth 5 points. You can have 5 levels and they're or 25 points or whatever. So then you can come up here and as you select each one of these, right now this is saying 11 or more. Level 4 is worth 11 or more. So depending if they get 4 or 4, right? So if you select, if they get all the way down level 4, depending, right now they're worth 4 points, 4 points, 4 points, 4 points. So depending how much criteria they have. So this is, only worth 12 points really. If they did the best they could do, it's worth 12 points. Anyway, so I won't get into editing all that, but that's kind of the idea behind how that works. And when you go to grade with it, you get a little checkbox next to each one of these. And you can also add the terminology inside each of these squares. So you can be very descriptive to the students. At this level, for this criterion, this is what I'm looking for. Right? And be very specific. So that's the idea behind it. and then you can create a pretty solid rubric in the tool. It's really not too bad, and especially in the Dropbox, it works pretty well. Again, there's some issues with discussions. We're working with the company actually trying to get them to fix it, and they're kind of listening in one ear, but hopefully get them to fix it for us. So I'm going to close that rubric out. And this actually just shows it backed me over to my rubrics I built in a new window. So I'm going to go back up on top. I opened a new window here. So here's my assignment again. So let's just steal one I already built. Well, I don't know if they're any good. We'll try one. We'll go with this one. They're probably just really quickly made, so they don't look at these as prime examples of how to build a rubric. And I'll say add selected. So now it shows this is my selected rubric. And I could say, wait a minute, that's the wrong one. I could remove it and then try again. So I added the wrong rubric accidentally. And I can also, so here's my instructions for the students. So I could come in and type out the instructions. Make sure you do this, turn it in as a Word doc, use this naming convention, all of those things. And I could also just put C attached PDF file and attach my file that I've already built. So if you already have your instructions created, you could just add the file, add as a PDF or something. And then just make sure you write here C attached file for instructions, something to that effect. I can also record audio here if I want to record a little message, get her done, right? You get in there, get whatever you want to do there, just so that you can. That's an option. This is actually you'll find throughout in the gradebook. You can record little sections as you're grading. There's some neat things you can do there. And it can be kind of handy, kind of neat for students. Submission options. So right now they're allowed unlimited submissions. I could say only one file per submissions. Right now they could put maybe 2 files for one submission. Depends what I want them to upload. You might want to modify that. And it's also saying all submissions are kept, or I could say only the most recent one is kept. So depending on how I have these, there's different options. And this is my originality check options. When I select the up on top, these open up to me down here. When you first open yours, it might look more like this. So you may have to click Show Advanced Options. So if I scroll down here, there's a few things that should be defaulted or not. So allow submitters to see original reports. I frankly don't know why you wouldn't allow them to see that.
Right. Yeah,
That's
the whole
point. So yeah, I think that should be default, but it's not. So make sure that you select that. And then it's also showing them when or if the grade mark tool is available to students. So, the frequency down here.
So the grade mark is.
The grade mark was that second option I clicked on and turned in that shows them the spelling errors, grammar errors.
Right.
That's the grade mark part. So you don't have to even use that. You can actually turn off some of those things. So that's this grammar check thing down here.
Right. Which you want.
Yep, I think it's a great tool.
Yeah.
So automatically we're going to check in all submissions. This basically means everyone that gets turned in gets pushed against it. If this was down here and I said identify individual ones, I could just go through my assignments and go, I don't know about this one, push the little button and submit it to turn it in. So it just checks ones I tell it to. I don't know the point of that, but you could. And for what you're doing, that actually might be a way to do it for what your
personal memoir, and all of a sudden it's written like absolutely perfectly.
Or if you're allowing multiple submissions, I haven't tested this, so don't hold it to me just yet. But if you're doing multiple submissions, I'm pretty certain if I select this, I can probably just push the submission I want checked. So their first 2 attempts shouldn't go through automatically. I believe I'll have to test that to make sure, but I believe if I check this, I can just go push their 3rd submission. So if they've submitted it a few times, I should be able to only submit one of those, but their final, whatever their final submission was.
Yeah, the final.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I could probably only submit their final.
Right. So it would be a good idea because I was thinking the 3rd draft that might be good for them to push that through and see originally how it goes. So they can
But they can also do right here, allow other files to be checked against submission. So if I don't have this on, it doesn't index that file. So if they submit it twice, it's not checking against itself. Does that make sense?
No.
So because what I'm doing when I turn this in is it turns into like a paper database, if you will. So as a student, I turn in my file, then a week later, I kind of fixed it. I turned it in again. It says yours 80% plagiarized, 90% plagiarized. All I changed was 10%, right? But if I don't do this, if I deselect that, it doesn't turn it into that area, so it doesn't index my paper I just turned in. So when I turn it in again, it doesn't see it as a plagiarized because I'm not plagiarizing against myself. It wasn't turned in.
Okay, so index files.
Yep.
For original.
So basically, it's not turning that file in to have others checked against it. So at the end of the day, you probably want that because you don't want them cheating off each other.
Right.
But for their own papers, initially, you might not. There may be reasons why you want that turned off.
Okay, so this would be, uncheck it for.
So it's not
The first
submitted.
phase.
Yeah, I would say uncheck it. We're actually looking. I'm working with another professor who found a great idea in one of the E-major, I think it was, about creating an area for students just to go turn in stuff and test them. The settings are right. That doesn't mess with anything, so they can just use it for testing purposes only to test against their files outside of instructors' classes.
Yeah,
So we're looking at something like that.
Would be great for the students because you want them to, because these are 1101 and 1102 students. So
Yeah, they need to
really
know.
Get the plagiarism thing.
Yeah, they need to know this is
And,
plagiarized.
and so if they can see it, it does.
Yeah, big red bills. Yeah.
That's it.
So there's a few settings here that's worth looking at. Again, that check submission against. This first one is kind of where that's going. Just use paper database, current and archived internet. So it's really checking against a lot of stuff. So it does pretty well. Under grammar check, there's some different handbooks actually. So the advanced one works pretty well for what we're doing, but you can actually check it against different handbooks as far as how well it's grading them. Not grading them, but the grammar it's giving them, the suggestions it's telling them. The different dictionaries, and you can specify what you want to look for, and that's the grammar check part of it.
Which is great.
Yeah, I think it's a really neat tool. So once you have all those set, now I'm going to say save and close. So now I've built a new assignment. It's going to be all the way down near the bottom, my get or done assignment. My little ruler here, it's being graded. If I mouse over the things, it tells me stuff. So this has originality check turned on, and it's also being assessed. It's tied to a grade item, get or done. So it actually gives you some information just by knowing that. If you mouse over these, it'll let you know
Cool.
kind of what they're associated to. A lot of times you'll see little icons and they usually mean something. So mousing over them will give you some kind of understanding on what they are for and what they do.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, when I put their first thing, I'm gonna probably call you up to double check on.
Oh, yeah, of course, please do. That's why we're here. No problem. I was going to tell you that should cover at least the idea of how that associates things, and that's the same way when you're building a discussion, building a quiz. So it's pretty much the same process that you'll build. You can tie the gradebook directly into it as you do it. If I go back to my gradebook again, over here in grades, I'm going to go manage grades actually. I'm going to scroll down, and I now have this new assignment underneath my category. It's already happy. Everything's already settled. I didn't mess up I don't have any notes saying I messed something up because I put it in a category that I already had specified. This is what it's worth. So it kept my weighting and everything's fine. So the other piece I didn't point out earlier is up here on settings. So if I click settings, when I first come in that setup wizard, maybe I walk through something. Now it's maybe the end of the semester, or I get in there and I go, I want to check something, okay? If I click settings, it allows me to go in there and fix or modify any of my settings in my gradebook. So my personal display option, this is how I see the gradebook. An org unit display is how the student sees the gradebook. I don't like the terminology, but that's how they do it. So right now, I have listed, so I see the student's username and their email in my gradebook. Sometimes the username is kind of handy because you might have two John Smiths, and then you can decipher which J. Smith you're actually grading. So that can come in handy. And this is what I'm seeing. I see all of this, right? Points, weighted, grade scheme. I'm going to deselect a couple of these and I'll show you. I'll just keep points grade for a second. I'm going to show you what that does to our gradebook. Again, all those other settings looked at earlier, I can kind of specify. Plus a couple others, like this number of columns before a user details repeat. So I can actually say I don't want, that's so their name, all those details. Maybe I'm having those too close together. I can actually show me more columns before I see that again. Because if you're scrolling over across your gradebook, you might need to know that student because you're trying to grade clean over here, and you need to know who you're grading.
Right.
That's what that's for.
Okay.
Number of users before column header repeats, so the same idea down. And yeah, this is about
good.
so you can
That's
repeat the
very
calculated front and back, so
Yeah.
you know where you're at. And my start page. So by default, yours is probably going to be manage grades. I've already modified mine. So when I first go to my gradebook, it should go to enter grades instead of to manage grades.
Right.
So after you get it all set up, you might want to do that. Just save yourself some time later. So your default entrance point to your gradebook is enter grades. So I'm going to come up here and click org unit display options now. And it's asking me, instead of just saving, now it's asking me to go figure. But now I'm just, yep, I want to save those things I changed.
Okay, org unit display option, that's what the students say.
Yep. So right now I have everything selected. What I would like to do when I do mine is I make sure that what I see matches what they see. I don't know what they see. So I make my settings the same as theirs. Because otherwise I have students like this might be turned off. They don't see anything and they're like, I can't see my grades because I've deselected something. So if you make yours match theirs, it makes life easier. So you know what they're saying. And most of these others are fairly basic here. So I wouldn't save that. And I'll go to calculation options. So calculation options where I could change if I wanted to from weighted to points or formula. I could also change what I'm releasing, my calculated final grade or my adjusted final grade. So this is some of the stuff we saw earlier. Most of these settings we actually saw earlier. I think all of them. So I think I'm still good with all these. So I'm going to go ahead and say save. Yes, and close. So now if I go back to enter grades here. So notice what I only see is one thing here. They get 0. Most there's no grades in some of this stuff, so that's all right. But let's see if there's any grades over here. So I have 90 out of 100, right? So if I go back now and click on settings, and I go to what I'm showing, right? I'm only showing points grade. So that's what points is. So let's try our weighted grade. Because it's not as, I don't know why, it just doesn't seem as obvious as it sounds because some of those look different. So here's my weighted, 35 out of 65. Where's the other one? 17, the one that was on 100 we're looking at. And some of these, actually, this one's probably has a special thing. This one's actually showing more because when it's a subtotal, but there's probably a separate setting. That's why that's showing different things. But it's worth kind of checking there because you might find certain things that make sense, like that 100%. It's like this is showing both the points, 35, 35, and 100%. Right. So again, my settings. Actually, that's funny. Showing both really should just be showing one. Let's go with grade scheme symbol and color. Now, if I close that and go back to enter grades, that should give us little differences here. Probably a lot of reds, right? And this one actually is associated to my other scheme, so it has a letter grade associated to it. Because again, I played with some of these already, so it has a letter grade scheme associated. There's the one I had at 90. But so there's different, yeah. So there's some different options you can do. Just for kind of how you see it. I kind of like the colors.
Yeah,
you can go in there.
I don't know that I'll be able to
Yeah.
do that, but I very much like the idea.
Yeah, so you can a quick look like this student needs some help. I need to check in with them. They're struggling. Like, yeah, Wendy out there, she's having a hard time. That's who was on earlier. I don't know if you've seen her. She was on earlier. Again, I didn't get into a lot with schemes, and I'm not going to get real deep into that because it's not used very heavily, and it might just be more confusing, but you can modify schemes. If you click that, it lets you create schemes. You can actually copy schemes. Go with the whole KISS method.
You betcha.
And if you decide you want to play with that, just come talk to us.
Yeah.
So we can do,
I might even call in next week to set up, like I said, they're not getting their first big grade. I think their first big paper is turned in on the 28th. I mean, they've already gotten back one in class, diagnostic essay, which was very low. The grades are very low.
Gotcha.
They took it well, but they're allowed to redo it for a much higher grade.
Yeah.
That's why they took it well.
Yeah, that's why. That's good though. I think that's the whole idea of what we're doing here. So
Yeah,
I think that covers most of what we're looking at here.
that's good.
Um,
Then I think maybe perhaps I'm gonna whack at it by myself.
Okay.
And so I get a better idea, and so to be able to do that, so nothing's permanent. Is it a sandbox thing? Do you have a
So-
sandbox for this?
so
where I
you
play
can-
with it?
If you want a sandbox, you just let us know and we'll make one. So just send an email to online@westgate.edu and say I'd like a sandbox, and one of our senior citizens will build you one, no problem. So we'll make you again the sandbox, and like we talked about, I think you're in the training before, weren't you? Yeah, just a place you can bury your brother, kind of, right? Nobody knows. That's the whole idea. You get in there and break things, and that's what it's for. So you can go and play with it or build something in there and then reuse content from there if you really want to. So, but yeah, you can certainly do that. Just let us know. We can build you one.
Yeah, I need to do this.
I know you have a muted microphone, Jennifer, but if you have any questions, can you throw me a quick chat letting me know you're all well, or if you have any questions? Or she may have ran away. Oh, you're here, yay. Okay, very good. And as you already know, Jennifer, we've talked to you before. If you have any questions from us, please let us know. We're here to help. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off our little Hangout archive here.
Well, thank you very
Stop
much for
sharing my
this.
screen. Of
I'm
course.
gonna try to go to as many training sessions as I can.
Okay. We will be offering, I'm going to stop my
It's
broadcast
nice
here.
that they have that. It's really nice that they offer all of this stuff
Good.
and help.
We try.
Some of us need help.
We all need help. I'm going to kill my broadcast.